Okay, hello everybody. How are you doing? So today I'm going to review Shary AI, which is another chat GPT interface that allows you to upload a PDF and then interact with that PDF. So let me share my screen. So here you see the Shary AI landing page, the web page here. It says here, you can sign up, you can log in, here are the different plans. The free one allows you to upload up to 3 documents, and you can ask up to, I think, 25 questions per session until it resets the next day. There's your professional and your business, I guess. In terms of the professional, or if you will, the paid version, it seems quite reasonable per month. It's cheaper, I think, in this sense than some of the other ones like Humato or ChatDoc or Chat PDF. I'm not entirely sure, so you'll just have to compare that yourself if you want to know the differences in price. But what we're here for is really the service of chatting with a specific document. You can the landing page doesn't have that much information, actually. It just says how it works. You can upload a doc, you can chat with it, and then you can share it. I think all of the other services that I reviewed, the other PDF chat services, are similar. It's here it says get 10 times more productive. I think the designer of this program is trying to market it towards maybe, if you will, business applications, perhaps. I'm going to be reviewing it entirely in relationship to research or scholarly research, or for use in the academy or at universities. And that's it. It's very light. There's not much information in terms of the product itself. It's just this landing page. It doesn't really tell you what the limit of the document is, like how large your PDF can be. And it doesn't really tell you actually what chat GPT service it's linking to. I'm suspecting it is just 3.5 and not 4, because 4 is more costly. And it doesn't say whether it allows you to access that more updated the GPT model. Okay, so I've already uploaded 2 documents, because I've tried it already before pressing record. I uploaded, as I have in the past, something that I myself have written for this online educational resource, which is a collection of essays that my colleagues at Kwantlen had organized and has published. And I wrote a chapter called Race and Racism. And so I uploaded it here, and then it shows up in your all documents. And then right away, it actually tells you here what the document is about. It says the document discusses the history and impact of colonialism, racism, and racial profiling in Canada. It explains how colonization led to the implementation of a political, legal, economic system controlled by a foreign sovereign authority, which resulted in the marginalization and disempowerment of Indigenous peoples. That's true. I think I do write that. The document also highlights how the civilizing discourse is used to justify the establishment of residential schools. Yes, I do say that. The purpose of the document is to provide readers with a critical understanding of the systemic structural nature of racism and encourage critical thinking about the ways in which race intersect. Yes, that's true. Okay. So here, what is interesting in this interface with ChatGPT, which is a bit different, I guess, than other ones that I've covered, like ChatDoc or ChatPDF or Ask PDF, Asker PDF or Humata. It actually has kind of 6 buttons on the bottom, where it says simplify, highlight, sentiment, the mood of the document, summarize, enrich, and critique. So I actually did that. So I asked it earlier to highlight. So I clicked on that highlight button, and then it highlighted my document, or if you will, what it believes are the main highlights from the document I wrote about race and racism. It says racism can be naturalized. Critical thinking can reveal racism. Yeah, it's multidimensional. Race can be as an everyday operation. It's an action that can be done. Yeah, that might be useful. Although I find whenever programs like this do that, when they distill, if you will, the key points into bullets, since there's no one here to narrate those bullets, I'm not so sure if there's any contextual understanding of the document, right? So it could be good in the sense it gives you this quick snapshot of maybe some of the key highlights, as it's called, in the document. But I'm not so sure if it's actually, if I was, say, someone who didn't know anything about this document, I'm not so sure if it's giving me a full picture of, say, the argument that I presented in the paper. You can click on mood, which I thought was quite interesting. This is actually the most interesting. It says that the sentiment of the document is focused on the topic of racism in its various forms. The overall sentiment is negative, as the document highlights the negative effects of racism. I thought that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I don't talk about the positive aspects of racism. Yeah, the dominant emotions are anger, frustration, and sadness. Wow. I find that quite funny. I'm not so sure if I would characterize my tone of voice in the chapter that I wrote as anger, frustration, or being sad. But it is true that the themes include the impact of racism on marginalized communities, which I think I don't celebrate that. The need for critical race theory to understand the complexities of racism. Yeah, that's perhaps more somber, but again, I don't think I have a sad. Maybe I do, though. Maybe this is actually an interesting kind of Freudian kind of examination of the text from this third sort of perspective that's quite dispassionate. So maybe I am. Maybe I have to rethink what I wrote. Maybe I am being sad and frustrated. And the importance of intersectionality and analyzing the effects of race on social determinations. I'm not so sure of that last clause. That's a bit goofy. And the importance of intersectionality in analyzing the effects of race on social determinations. I think that's actually a semantic mistake on the part of GPT. That's not what I said. Yeah. Because I'm not saying the effects of race on social determinations, that in fact that they're integrated. Anyways, a minor issue. What is also interesting, if you click on source here, it opens up a sidebar, and then it kind of, in a sense, is looking for the place in the document where the answer is derived from, right? So it's saying in this section about the criminal code or hate bias or prejudice, this is in this question about mood, I guess it is from this section that it feels that it's examining my document and believing from this section I'm angry, frustrated, and perhaps sad, which could be. I think if I do reread that, maybe I'm a little bit frustrated by the presence or the existence of racism. So that it kind of is a kind of citation, which is very similar to the way ChatDoc and Humata does it, where they have actually the sidebar open, and when the sidebar can be, if you will, shifted left or right, the text can be made bigger or smaller. And then it highlights both ChatDoc and Humata, both highlight, if you will, the text from which the answer is derived. This does it a bit differently in the sense it opens up this other sidebar, which can be useful. But it doesn't give the page numbers in that sense. Yeah, so I'm not sure that that's, yeah, it's still useful. And then you can also click on enhance enhance the document, or this button here on the bottom, it says enrich, so if you want to enhance the document, meaning it's kind of now giving you suggestions. So that's interesting. It's kind of the editorial button. How could we improve this document? So it's not just something that I wrote and have published online, but it could be something that you're working on, a draft, for example. So I can see how the enrich or the enhance button can be useful. It suggests I could clarify the language, which it makes me a little bit sad because it's suggesting that it's saying that my language is a bit too complex. I don't know. I think I'm writing it for a first year university student, or maybe even a smart high school student could certainly read it and not struggle with any of the language. Engage the reader. It says the document is informative, but it could be more engaging. So I guess maybe it's suggesting my language is somewhat boring. It can improve the organization. Oh, it's not well organized, which I find interesting. I do actually have smaller sections and clear headings, but I don't use bullets or numbered lists, which is quite funny, I think, because typically in academic writing, you actually want to explain your argument. You don't want to actually present, if you will, an argument in the form of bulleting, because bulleting works well if there's a narrator to walk the reader or the listener through the bullets. Anyways, so my understanding is bullets could be useful if, perhaps for more scientific or technical writing, but in the context of arts and humanities, perhaps writing a full paragraph and sentence structure is perhaps better, maybe. And then it says deepen the content. That's interesting. So it feels that I'm not very I'm not very deep. It could benefit from more depth and detail. The author could consider including more research, stats, or case studies to support the argument. Well, it is an introductory chapter on race and racism, and I had a limited amount of, if you will, word length. So perhaps Shary is correct, but maybe it is incorrect because it's using the wrong metric to measure, if you will, the purpose or the quality of the writing. Okay. So anyways, it's just saying, this can be improved in terms of the language and organization. True, I think that's true. Critique the document. It says the document provides a comprehensive overview of the complex issues of race and racism in Canada, particularly in the context of criminology. It's true. One weakness of the document, it does not provide a clear definition of what constitutes race or a racialized person. I think that's actually untrue. I think, being the author, I think I do say what race is, or what maybe race should not be understood as, right? Because I say we should challenge this notion of race. I won't get into the weeds on this, but yeah, I think that's perhaps not a fair critique that it's saying it's ambiguous. Okay. A strength of the document is it talks about these different forms of racism. However, one weakness, it doesn't provide a solution. That's classic, right? Yes, you should always provide a solution, but perhaps not on a exegetical kind of explanatory chapter on race and racism. The purpose is not to solve race as a problem, but rather to, if you will, unpack it, to examine it, to interrogate it, or to to deconstruct it. So it's interesting. It's that ChatGPT always wants there to be in the, if you will, conclusion or the summary, some type of pathway forward, like an action plan, which academic writing is not about solving problems, but rather examining or interrogating them. Anyways, what's the key point of the article, so that you can also no, this is actually what I wrote. So I asked, well, what's the key point of the article? The key point is to explain how race and racism are socially integrated and naturalized in existing Canadian systems of criminal justice. Yeah, I think that's true. Explores the social, legal, historical structures. True. It also examines how racism acts in a systemic manner. Yeah, true. That's good. I think that's a good key point. But then I wanted it to write, and I thought that was a bit short. If that's the whole key point in the kind of in a paragraph that had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences. I wrote. Then I remembered you can also do a bit of prompt engineering. You can say you are an academic scholar and researcher. What? And then I replaced that, and then I reiterated that. What is the key point of the article? So actually, when I say that, the answer is similar up until this part is just reduplicated. So it actually doesn't use a different, more scholarly academic voice. That part above there and this part is the same. So by asking it to be more scholarly, it just actually adds another paragraph. So it just expands the first paragraph into a longer paragraph, which is not bad, but I thought it was interesting. It didn't actually change the voice, right? It just actually it expanded the answer. So maybe, I don't know, maybe this part, the second part here, is more scholarly. I think the voice is the same. I read it before I started this video. The document also discussed racism, and yeah, no, it's about the same. It's the same tone and voice, anyways. So I didn't find that there is that much difference when I say you're an academic scholar. What are other formats you can provide for the summary? So I'm actually kind of wondering how else could it, if you will, discuss or talk to me. And then I say, can you present this in the form of a data dictionary? And it says, oh, yes, I can. As for your request for a data dictionary, I can provide a list of key terms and their definitions related. So I actually didn't want to make a table box of a so-called data dictionary, which is often something you would see perhaps more in science. Instead, it redirected me into, if you will, a numbered list. Okay, so it says race, racialization, colonialism over. So this is quite useful. And actually, when I read this, I thought, oh, this is kind of like a glossary. So I said, oh, can you provide a glossary of the key terms? And then it just actually repeated verbatim the exact same 10, which I find interesting because when you ask ChatGPT in plain ChatGPT to redo something, often it will then, if you will, restate it in a slightly different manner. But in this case, in Shary, it seems like it's much more on rails and giving me, if you will, this answer here is after I say, can you provide me a glossary? It's exactly the same here. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know why that is. Perhaps it's the way the program is written or the API is attached to ChatGPT. And then here I write, what does the author mean by institutional racism? And I think it describes it well. Can you rewrite it in a more scholarly voice? Again, I'm trying to push it a bit. It just actually writes something very similar, but longer. Again, it's not bad, but I didn't find that the voice was actually that different. And then I say use a scholarly voice to explain institutional racism. And and I think that's the reason I asked about that is because I think some of the language model could get confused by the way in which I talk about institutional racism as, if you will, a rules-based racism. And so it's a good test that it was not fooled by that. What schools of thought are connected to his arguments, meaning I'm referring to myself in the third person. The document doesn't explicitly mention any specific schools of thought. That's interesting. However, the document does draw on the work of Kimberly Crenshaw and her concept of intersectionality, which I do, of course, talk about. It also references the research of Johann Friedrich Blumenbach, which I do. I talk about the historical importance of Blumenbach. But then I said, okay, that's interesting. So it is, you know, because I'm trying to say, well, what can you actually do some more, if you will, synthetic thinking about it? It's not able to. It just says, okay, there's Kimberly Crenshaw, and there is Blumenbach, and then I say, you said the document draws on a range of sources. Can you elaborate and cite? So here I'm wanting it to cite in the actual answer, not just in the sidebar in terms of the sources. And then it says certainly, it says the document draws on a range of sources to explore the complex multidimensional nature of race and racism. For example, it references Crenshaw and then Blumenbach. Additionally, draws on a critical perspective on race, blah, 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 blah. Overall, the document draws on a range of sources. That's, yeah. I think it would I think it fails in that sense because I think there are other sources cited, and here it's not able to pull them out. So I don't know why that is. And then I say, tell me more about Blumenbach, and it just repeats what I've written actually in the text, and it just tells me the document doesn't go on further in detail about Blumenbach's work. So this is an interesting illustration of how it is different than something like ChatDoc. because I think I recall in another video review of these other PDF interfaces with ChatGPT, one of the programs, ChatDoc, when I ask it more about a specific document, what can you tell me more about that? It actually goes outside of the document. It actually is connected to the internet and looks for something that that author wrote somewhere else and then brought it into the answer. So in that sense, that's very useful. Shary doesn't do that here. So you could also see it that's half full, or sorry, half empty. But you could also see it as half full in the sense, what if you only want to interact with this document only, and you don't want it to be tainted by anything outside of the document? Shary, I think, is demonstrating that it is staying within the boundaries of the document that you uploaded, unlike, say, ChatDoc and I think Pramata as well, who are both able to go outside of the document, which is something that you may not want to do, right? So if you are more interested, if you will, in the kind of the integrity of the data or it being bounded, then maybe Shary, one of the, perhaps let's look at it as the glass half full, maybe one of the features and strengths of Shary is that it stays completely within the PDF that's uploaded. And then I ask it, can you quiz me? Then I say, what's the concept of intersectionality? And then can you correct my response? It says, sure. Okay, so it says, you asked, what is the concept of intersectionality? How? And then I give this answer. I just wrote this, on the keyboard here. I say, I think intersectionality means that there are multiple social, environmental, economic factors that are all simultaneously acting on a subject. It makes it difficult to determine how race might act alone or independently, blah, blah, blah. Race is interlocked with class, economics, wealth, gender. It doesn't act alone, so on. And that was quite interesting, right? It says, oh, your response is quite accurate. Intersectionality is indeed the concept that social identity such as race, blah, blah, blah. So I thought that was interesting. It's patting me on the back that I'm able to reiterate my own writing. How would you, and then I ask it, how would you grade my answer in a scoring between 1 and 10, 10 being the best? I'm sorry, I can't grade your answer, but so it's interesting because I can't grade your answer because, I'm not able to do that. However, I can review it and I can provide some feedback. And it says your response regarding intersectionality is quite accurate, and then it's kind of repetitive, but it's not bad. It's mirroring what I said, right? Saying, I hear this is what you said, and that is correct. So that's very useful. So then I also uploaded another document that I've used in the past, which is the very famous article by Frederick Jameson called Postmodernism, or the Cultural Logic of Late Capitalism, written in 1983, actually. This is republished in New Left Review in 1984. So it tells us that Frederick Jameson, when I uploaded this document, it immediately gives me the little summary of what I uploaded. It tells me about the author, that he's this literary critic, and that he's exploring postmodernism. True, right? All of those things. And then it gives me some, if you will, suggestions again here, like, it's interesting, like, I don't know why it's asking me about Parliament's poem, and then also the experience of the sublime. I mean, Jameson does mention those things. He does mention the sublime, but I'm not so sure if it would be a key feature of his debate or examination of postmodernism as the cultural logic of late capital. Anyways, that's not important. You could also, again, here, as you can see, you can click on those 6 buttons and ask it these kind of canned questions about simplification, highlighting, summarizing, so on and so forth. So I asked, what does Jameson mean by cultural logic of late capitalism? How is late capitalism different than early capitalism? So I'm trying to show the difference between the first document that I uploaded, which is very, very pedagogic and aimed more at, say, first-year university, the chapter I wrote about race and racism. And I think it did a very good job because my voice in that document is very pedagogic and very exegetical and explanatory, right? So not difficult and should not be confusing for a large language model for this kind of semantic program to understand. But this is more complicated. This is more of a theoretical debate, and the writing is perhaps more advanced and not pitched at a first-year university level. So I think what I'm asking it, what does he mean by cultural logic of late capital? How is it different than if you were early capitalism? Yeah, I think Shary does a good job and says, Jameson argues that postmodernism reflects and reinforces the cultural logic of late capitalism by blurring the boundaries between high and low culture, incorporating elements of mass commercial culture into its aesthetic. Okay, that's great. But then, of course, I say, well, let's push it a bit more. Let's keep going. Let's try and break it, right? Like, so how can a time period have an aesthetic? I only thought humans can have an aesthetic. And then it says, well, that's, actually, he's arguing that a cultural dominant can be an aesthetic. So in this context, an aesthetic is used to describe the cultural artistic expression of a particular historical period. So I think it was a very strong, if you will, response to that. And if you click on that source, it should tell us out here on the opened right-hand side panel where the term aesthetic comes from. So again, I think this is an interesting feature in terms of a kind of citation. It tells you where in the document that this answer is derived. Does he think that every artist is thus an expression of this period of late capitalism? What happens to the individual? What happens to individualism? Right. So I'm trying to be a bit argumentative. He argues blah blah blah. Same. It's actually a bit repetitive that postmodernism is a cultural dominant. But then here it says, as for individualism, Jameson argues postmodernism challenges the elitism and authoritativism of high modernism and can be seen as a kind of aesthetic populism. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know if it meets head on my question about individualism, but I think it's a fair response. What examples does he use to illustrate it? Yeah, he does talk about Godard, Burroughs, Thomas Pynchon, Ishmael Reed, the Nouveau Roman. Yeah, that's quite good, but it doesn't talk about them in, if you will, detail. So maybe that's the limitation of my question. I should have said, please give me a more detailed explanation and, if you will, summarization and reiteration of the art, that he uses. And then I say, and then in its answer, they talk about international style. So I say, I do not know about the international style. Can you please elaborate and cite? And then it says, in the document, Jameson critiques the architectural high modernism and so-called international style, which refers to the dominant architectural style of the mid-20th century. The international style was characterized by functionalism, minimalism, and the use of industrial materials such as steel and glass. And I could, of course, keep asking it about functionalism or minimalism and the use of industrial materials. I can keep asking it. And I think it would do a very good job in terms of responding to my answers. So I find in terms, and here we can ask it one more. Tell me more about minimalism. Well, there you go. And I knew what would happen. You only have 25, if you will, questions per day. It's going to be reset tomorrow. You can, of course, increase that if you go to the paid model, but 25 per day, that's not bad, I think, especially if you don't ask frivolous questions. That's very good. Yeah. So so that's my quick kind of review of how you would use Shary to interact with a PDF. And so I'll stop sharing the screen. So yeah, so in terms of a summary of my thoughts, I think, I guess the main question would be, is Shary useful for academic research, for, say, an undergraduate student interacting with the document? Yes. Is it useful for a graduate student interacting with the document? Yes, because again, like all the other PDF interaction, GPT, generative AI interfaces that are out there now, it also is very useful in the sense of, instead of just reading a document, you can interact with it, right? You can challenge it, you can ask the document specific questions. And so in that sense, it's almost a new way of reading, right? Or if you will, adjacent to reading, because you're not reading it, you're just you keep asking the AI to explain what it has read, right? Which I think is useful in the sense it is almost like having a private tutor, right? I think what is also, I thought, interesting is the way it's cited in this, or the way in which it showed us the source, if not cited. It doesn't really show you the page number, right? Because in the Frederick Jameson article, which was published in New Left Review from 1984, there are page numbers, but unlike Humata and ChatDoc, Shary is not citing the number. So I would say that is a negative, that the source, when you click on the source stack, could improve. There could be more granularity, more detail there. Can it help you understand the text? Again, I think your mileage varies, or may vary, as they say. I think it can help you if you already understand a little bit about the context of the article from which it's inserting itself. Like if you understand the debate, then yes, I think using something like Shary, ChatDoc, ChatPDF, Ask Your PDF, Humata, all of these programs are very useful for interacting with a particular document. And then as I showed in the use example of saying, asking it to give you a quiz, that's also useful as well, right? Because you can ask it to, if you will, test your knowledge about something. Would I use it? Probably not. But I think I think AI, and in general generative AI, and these types of interactions with a text document is so interesting that maybe I would use it just because I'm fascinated by the ability to converse with the document as opposed to read the document, right? So I think that would be interesting. And maybe I would use it as a form of review even, right? I could even, like, let's say I finished reading and I had these notes, and then I was like, oh, but does the author say that? I might then go into a program like this and go, does Michael Ma say this? And then very quickly, it's like it's 2 a.m. in the morning, there's no one to ask, and I'm tired. Maybe it will actually show me this other perspective. And so in that sense, I think programs like this are so fascinating because it is like having another person with you, another set of eyes, right? That could critique the document or summarize it or highlight things or to simplify a concept. So let me take that back where I said I wouldn't use it. I think I would use it, but maybe not right away. Right? I probably want to read something for myself before I would surrender, my own interpretation to something like Shary. So I think I would use it in addition to reading it for myself. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the limitations, of course, is that it has, you can only have 25 questions per day. But that's similar, I think, to Humata. Humata also only allows you a certain amount of documents and questions, and then you have to wait actually a much longer period. I think ChatDoc is more permissive. Ask Your PDF is also more permissive. It allows you to do much more. Also, Ask Your PDF allows for the use of ChatGPT-4, right? So the most recent large language model. But although in Ask Your PDF, it also only allows you to ask 5 questions per day before it resets. So I'm not, and also I'm never sure if ChatGPT-4 is actually better, because I think this is still very good in terms of, like, I know what I wrote and I know what Frederick Jameson wrote, and I think all of these answers are very cogent. I think a lot of the fears that you hear about, is it hallucinating? Is it confabulating answers? I didn't find it, not in looking at these two documents. It's not confabulating anything. It's not making up stuff. It certainly didn't make up any citations, because it's also saying it's not able to look outside of the document. So that could be a plus. If you're worried about confabulation, then Shary might be a very, very good Chat GPT interface with the uploaded PDF. So Shary, I think, is good. It gives, I think, I would give it a thumbs up. It's That's a very useful and well-made, if you will, interface with ChatGPT. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. See you next time.